What would you do if saving a life cost you everything? Fired, humiliated, abandoned, Dr. Maya Caldwell risked it all to do the right thing. But what happened next? No one could have predicted. From losing everything to building a hospital that would change lives forever, her journey is one of resilience, courage, and justice. Stay with us until the end, because this story will shock, inspire, and move you in ways you never expected. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from today. And if you love powerful stories like this, subscribe to Inspiring Stories Told for more. Dr. Maya Caldwell moved through the bright, sterile hallways of Westbridge Memorial Hospital with purpose. The scent of antiseptic clung to the air, mingling with the distant hum of medical machines and the occasional urgent beeping of monitors. It was just another shift in the most prestigious hospital in Atlanta, a facility that prided itself on serving the elite, the powerful, the wealthy, as long as they fit a certain profile. Maya had worked here for nearly 7 years, earning the quiet respect of the nurses and the reluctant acknowledgement of the doctors who saw her as competent but not quite equal. A black nurse in a white world, she was tolerated but never truly accepted. She had long since learned to bite her tongue, suppress her anger, and play by the rules, even when those rules were stained with prejudice. She had lost count of the times she had seen black patients ignored in favor of white ones, or poor patients turned away while rich donors were given priority care for the most minor of ailments. But what choice did she have? Speaking up meant risking everything. Tonight, though, something was different. She felt it in her bones, a tension in the air like the crackle before a storm. She had no idea that before the night was over, her entire world would be shattered. The emergency doors burst open with a loud bang. The sound of wheels screeching across the polished floor echoed through the ER as paramedics rushed in a gurney. "Gunshot wound," one of them shouted. "Multiple entry points, losing blood fast." The moment Maya saw the patient, her heart clenched. He was so young. Dante Hughes, no older than 24, his dark skin slick with sweat, his white hoodie soaked in blood. He lay limp, his chest barely rising, his breath coming in short, painful gasps. His left hand twitched slightly, fingers curling in weak protest, as if his body was still fighting to hold on. His eyes fluttered, struggling to stay open. Maya saw the sheer terror in them. "Please don't let me die." Her breath caught. But before she could move, before she could do the job she had sworn to do, a voice cold as steel sliced through the chaos. "No police clearance, no treatment. Let him die." Maya froze. Dr. Richard Caldwell, the hospital's chief administrator, stood by the nurse's station, arms crossed over his pristine white coat. His expression was unreadable, but his tone carried absolute authority. The room shifted. The tension was thick, suffocating. No one moved. The paramedics, who had done their job, who had fought to keep this young man alive long enough to get here, looked horrified. But they weren't in charge now. One of the doctors hesitated, then stepped back. A nurse quietly averted her gaze. Maya's stomach dropped. She turned toward the others, searching for any sign of resistance, any sign that someone, anyone, would speak up. But she saw nothing but fear. "He's bleeding out," she snapped, hoping, praying, that someone would stand beside her. "Not our concern," Caldwell said coolly. "Unless the police approve his treatment, we don't touch him. That's the policy." Maya's pulse thundered in her ears. Policy. The word disgusted her. This wasn't about protocols or procedures. This was about race. Dante was a young black man, and in Westbridge Memorial, that meant he was expendable. Her hands trembled at her sides. She looked at Dante again, watched as his chest rose and fell in short, ragged movements. The beeping of the monitors slowed, unsteady. He was fading fast. And yet, everyone was standing still. She knew the consequences. If she touched him, she would lose everything. But then, deep in the back of her mind, a voice, her mother's voice, whispered, "If you let him die, you're no better than them." Maya moved. She grabbed a pair of gloves and reached for the surgical tools, her hands steady now, driven by pure instinct. The room fell into a hushed, stunned silence. A male doctor, a white doctor, stepped forward, looking at her like she had lost her mind. "Don't be stupid, Maya." She ignored him. A nurse whispered behind her. Someone else gasped. Maya didn't care. She cut through Dante's hoodie, exposing the gunshot wounds, 3 of them. One near his shoulder, one in his side, one dangerously close to his abdomen. She pressed her hands against the worst wound, trying to slow the bleeding, her mind racing through every procedure she had ever learned. "I need suction, now," she barked, her voice unwavering. And despite the fear, despite the hesitation, one nurse, stepped forward. Maya worked fast, methodical, precise. Every second counted. Every movement was the difference between life and death. She heard Caldwell breathing heavily behind her, but she didn't stop. She stitched the wounds, stabilized Dante's airway, and monitored his vitals. The heart monitor steadied. The erratic beeping slowed into a strong, steady rhythm. He was alive. A wave of relief crashed over her, her fingers pressing against Dante's wrist, feeling the pulse that should have been gone by now. For the first time that night, she allowed herself to breathe. Slow, deliberate, clapping. Maya turned, her breath catching as she saw Dr. Caldwell standing there, smirking. His blue eyes glinted with something cruel as he stepped forward, his voice mocking. "Congratulations, Nurse Caldwell." His tone was ice cold. "You saved him. Now get out. You're fired." The words slammed into her like a physical blow. She stared at him, speechless. The nurses, the ones who had worked beside her for years, the ones who knew how much she had sacrificed, remained silent. No one spoke up. No one defended her. Her hands curled into fists. She wanted to scream, to fight, to demand that anyone stand with her. But she already knew the answer. If she had been anyone else, maybe they would have fought for her. But she was a black woman who had stepped out of line. She didn't wait to be escorted out. She pulled off her hospital badge, placed it on the counter, and walked out alone. The moment she stepped outside, the sky opened up, and the rain poured down in heavy sheets. Her scrubs clung to her skin, cold and soaked through, but she barely felt it. All she could feel was the weight of everything she had lost. Everything she had fought for, gone, discarded like trash. But somewhere, deep inside her, something else stirred. Something that whispered, "This isn't over." Maya walked out of that hospital drenched in rain, her heart heavy with betrayal, but somewhere deep inside, a fire had ignited. How are you feeling right now? Are you furious at the injustice she faced? Heartbroken by the silence of her colleagues? Inspired by her courage? What would you have done in her place? This is just the beginning of her journey. Should we continue? Press 1 to see what happens next, or press 0 if you think this is where her story should end. Let us know. We're listening. Maya's fate is in your hands. Maya sat in the dimly lit corner of her tiny apartment, staring blankly at the eviction notice taped to her door. Final warning. The bold red letters burned into her mind, making her stomach twist with dread. It had been 3 weeks since she was fired, and in that short time, everything had crumbled around her. Her savings? Gone. Her bank account was drained from paying bills, and now she didn't have enough to cover rent. Her landlord had no sympathy. He wanted the money by Friday, or she was out on the street. Her phone buzzed, another news alert flashing across the screen. Disgraced nurse recklessly defies hospital protocol, jeopardizing patient care. Maya's chest tightened. She had expected backlash, but this? The media had twisted everything, painting her as some kind of unhinged rebel instead of what she was, a nurse who refused to let a young black man die on a hospital floor. She scrolled through the comments, each one a stab to the gut. Small Blue Diamond, she got what she deserved. Should have followed the rules. Small Blue Diamond, typical. Always trying to play the hero and then crying when they face consequences. Small Blue Diamond, she should have known her place. Maybe this will teach her a lesson. Her hands trembled, rage mixing with despair. Her place. That's what they wanted, to remind her where she stood in their world. She had spent years proving herself, working twice as hard, sacrificing her personal life to become one of the best nurses in that hospital. And yet, one act of courage, and it was all wiped away. No hospital in the city would even look at her resume. Her former colleagues stopped responding to her messages. The ones who used to laugh with her in the break room now acted like she didn't exist. She was alone. And for the first time in her life, Maya wondered if she had made a mistake. Maya sat on the couch, wrapped in an old blanket, listening to the soft hum of the city outside. The lights in her apartment flickered. The landlord had threatened to cut the power next. She rubbed her temples, exhaustion pressing down on her. The past few weeks had felt like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. She had applied everywhere, begged every hospital, every clinic, but the moment they recognized her name, doors slammed shut. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "Baby, when you do what's right, the world won't always clap for you." But this wasn't just the world refusing to clap. This was the world ripping her apart, piece by piece. A sharp knock at the door startled her. She stood slowly, her body tense, a sick feeling curling in her stomach. She opened the door just a crack. Her landlord stood there, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Friday, Maya," he said. "I'm serious. No money, no apartment." She swallowed hard, nodding. "I understand." She shut the door, her body sagging against it. She had 4 days left. Maya walked through the city streets, her hoodie pulled tight around her head, trying to escape the suffocating weight of everything pressing down on her. She had nowhere to be, no job to go to, no future to look forward to. She was just another black woman the system had crushed and left behind. She wandered toward the park, where families gathered in the fading glow of the setting sun. Children laughed, joggers ran past her, couples sat close on benches. The world moved on as if nothing had happened. Then a sharp gasp. A thud. A cry of alarm. Maya's head snapped toward the sound. A small crowd had gathered near a park bench, their faces frozen in shock. She pushed through the onlookers and saw him. An older black man lay on the pavement, his body convulsing, his hands clutching his chest. His face was pale, his breath shallow. His eyes were wide with terror, but he couldn't speak. Cardiac arrest. Maya dropped to her knees without thinking. "Someone call an ambulance," she shouted, pressing 2 fingers to his neck. No pulse. The crowd murmured, some filming, some whispering. A security guard, a tall white man, stepped forward but made no effort to help. He crossed his arms and muttered, "Let the ambulance handle it." Maya's stomach twisted. She had seen this before. The hesitation. The silence. No, not again. She laced her fingers together, pressed her palms against the man's chest, and began compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. His body jerked slightly, but no breath came. She tilted his head back, pinched his nose, and breathed into his mouth. Come on, come on." She went again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Seconds felt like hours. Then, a sharp, shuddering gasp. The man's eyes fluttered, his chest rose and fell. Maya felt relief flood through her so fast she almost collapsed beside him. He was alive. Sirens blared in the distance, growing louder. A voice, urgent, filled with fear, cut through the noise. "Dad." A well-dressed black man rushed from a sleek black car, his expensive suit slightly wrinkled, his face filled with panic. He dropped beside the older man, gripping his hand. "Dad, can you hear me?" "It's me. It's Jonathan." Maya's head snapped up. Jonathan Ellington. A name she had heard 1,000 times. One of the richest men in the country. A billionaire. A healthcare mogul. A man who could ruin hospitals with a single phone call. And she had just saved his father's life. The paramedics took over, stabilizing the older man as Jonathan stood to face Maya. His dark brown eyes locked onto hers, intense, searching. "You saved my father," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Maya nodded slowly, exhaustion pressing down on her. "Please, I need your contact information." Just in case, she hesitated. She had nothing left, no home, no job, no future. What could possibly come from this? Then she remembered the last time she had saved someone's life, and how it had cost her everything. Would this time be any different? She reached into her pocket, fingers brushing against her old hospital ID, the only thing she had left from the life she lost. She handed it to him. Jonathan took it carefully, nodding. Maya turned away, walking off into the city, unaware that her life was about to change forever. Maya has lost everything, her job, her security, her future, yet she still chooses to save a life. How are you feeling right now? Do you admire her strength, or are you frustrated by the injustice she faced? What would you do if the world turned its back on you for doing the right thing? Now, a powerful man holds her hospital ID in his hands. Is this fate giving her another chance, or is she walking into another storm? Let us know. Press 1 if you're invested in Maya's journey. Press 0 if you'd walk away. Your voice matters. The night was eerily quiet. The city's usual sounds, car horns, distant chatter, the occasional siren, felt muted, as if the world itself had paused for something unseen. Maya sat on her couch, staring blankly at the peeling paint on her ceiling. The weight of exhaustion settled deep in her bones, but her mind refused to rest. She had walked the streets like a ghost, drowning in the harsh reality of her circumstances. No job, no home soon, no future. And yet, fate had thrown her into another life-or-death situation, one she had no choice but to act on. She had saved a man's life. Again, her fingers brushed against the hospital ID she had given Jonathan Ellington. Was that a mistake? Maybe. But what did she have to lose? A deep, steady hum interrupted her thoughts. Maya's stomach twisted as the sound grew louder, low, powerful, unrelenting. The walls of her tiny apartment seemed to vibrate from it, the very floor humming beneath her bare feet. Then, suddenly silence. She stood slowly, heart pounding. What was that? A flicker of light against the window caught her attention. Frowning, she moved toward it and pulled back the curtain. Her breath caught in her throat. Lined up outside her apartment building were 10 luxury cars, all sleek, black, and gleaming under the dim glow of the streetlights. What the hell? She wasn't the only one who noticed. Shadows flickered in the windows of neighboring apartments. Curtains twitched, and whispers filled the hallway outside her door. Her fingers clenched around the curtain's edge as dread crept into her veins. Who were they? Why were they here? Then a knock. Not frantic, not impatient. Steady, confident, deliberate. Maya's breath hitched. She stared at the door, frozen, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Her gut screamed caution, but she wasn't someone who ran from fear. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. Her hand hesitated on the knob for a fraction of a second. Then, she turned it and pulled the door open. Standing before her was Jonathan Ellington. His presence filled the doorway like a storm waiting to break. He was tall, his dark brown skin smooth under the streetlight glow. His eyes, intense, unwavering, held a sharp intelligence that sent a shiver down Maya's spine. He looked even more imposing than he had in the park, now that the panic was gone from his face. Behind him stood his assistant, a sharp-dressed woman holding a large envelope. Maya gripped the doorframe, her voice steadier than she expected. "Mr. Ellington." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Miss Caldwell, we need to talk." Jonathan stepped inside, his presence too large for her small apartment. The assistant followed, shutting the door behind them. Maya tried not to notice the contrast, his tailored suit against her thrift store furniture, his polished shoes sinking into the worn carpet. She crossed her arms, waiting. Jonathan gestured toward the assistant, who stepped forward and handed Maya the thick white envelope. She hesitated. "What is this?" Jonathan tilted his head. "Open it." Something about the way he said it sent another wave of unease through her. Maya slid her finger under the flap and pulled out the paper inside. The moment her eyes scanned the first line, her breath stopped. A check. For $1 million. The room spun. She read it again. And again. The zeros blurred together. Unreal, impossible. Her hands shook. She forced herself to look up. Her voice came out hoarse. "I can't accept this." Jonathan studied her for a moment, then took a slow step forward. "You can. And you will." Maya swallowed hard. $1 million. Enough to fix everything. Enough to start over. But why? What's the catch? She asked, eyes narrowing. Jonathan's lips curved slightly, as if amused by the question. You think I'm just throwing money at you out of gratitude? His voice was smooth, controlled. Maya's shoulders stiffened. Aren't you? He exhaled softly. Then, finally, the truth. I don't just own businesses, Maya, Jonathan said, pacing slightly. I own hospitals. A network of them. Some of the best in the country. She blinked. Of course. Ellington Medical Group. She had heard of them before, prestigious hospitals, research institutions, all of it under his control. Jonathan's gaze locked onto hers. I've spent years looking for someone like you, he continued. Someone who cares about saving lives more than policies. More than politics. Someone who doesn't hesitate. Maya felt her stomach tighten. What are you saying? Jonathan leaned slightly forward. I want you to lead a new hospital. Silence. Maya's breath hitched. What? A new initiative. No bureaucracy. No red tape. No turning people away. A hospital where the only thing that matters is saving lives. His voice was sharp, certain. And I want you to run it. Maya stared. A hospital. Her hospital. She felt a rush of emotions so fast it nearly made her dizzy. Hope. Disbelief. Fear. A hospital where she called the shots. Where no one died waiting for permission to be treated. Where patients weren't prioritized by their bank accounts or skin color. It was a dream she had never dared to have. She swallowed, forcing herself to think. Why me? You could hire anyone. Jonathan's lips pressed together. I've tried. His voice lowered. I've tested countless doctors, nurses, administrators. Most hesitated. Many looked away. His gaze pierced through her. You didn't. Maya's pulse pounded. She wanted to believe him. She did. But she had already lost everything once for doing the right thing. Could she risk it again? Could she trust the system? Could she trust him? Jonathan must have seen the doubt on her face, because his expression softened slightly. This isn't charity, Maya. I'm not throwing money at you and walking away. He took a step closer. I'm offering you a way to make a difference, without anyone standing in your way. Maya's fingers tightened around the check, the weight of it suffocating. $1 million. A hospital of her own. A chance to do what she was born to do. But also risk. She had been burned before. She had been betrayed, discarded, ruined. Could she survive it if it happened again? Jonathan took a slow breath. No red tape. No politics. No discrimination. Just medicine. His words settled deep into her bones. He held out his hand. Maya stared at it, her mind racing. This was everything she ever wanted. But could she trust it? Her fingers twitched at her side. Her heartbeat roared in her ears. And then as she reached out and took his hand, Maya barely had time to process what had happened. 1 minute, she was drowning under the weight of her losses, wondering if she'd ever get back on her feet. The next, she was standing at the edge of something bigger than herself, an opportunity to change the game completely. For the first time in weeks, hope flickered in her chest. But hope is dangerous. Because for every step forward, the system would find a way to push her back down. The next morning, Maya woke to the sound of her phone buzzing uncontrollably. She groaned, rubbing her eyes as she reached for it. The moment she saw the headlines, the sleep drained from her body. Fired nurse turned rogue? Maya Caldwell's reckless past exposed. Disgraced nurse plans to run a hospital? Experts say she's a legal disaster waiting to happen. Maya Caldwell's fake heroism, the truth behind her termination. Her stomach twisted. She clicked on one of the articles, her fingers tightening as she read. Lies. All of it. Westbridge Memorial was spinning the narrative, twisting the facts to make it seem like she had been a dangerous liability, a nurse who had put patients at risk rather than saving them. Dr. Calloway's name wasn't in the articles, but his fingerprints were all over them. And it didn't stop there. Within hours, the attacks escalated. Maya tried to buy coffee from her favorite shop. The barista refused to serve her. She walked down the street and felt eyes on her, whispers slipping through the air like poison. By the time she got home, her phone was flooded, not just with articles, but with hate. Small blue diamond, you're a disgrace to real nurses. Small blue diamond, If you hate the system so much, leave the country. Small blue diamond, no one's gonna trust a hospital run by you. Small blue diamond, you should have stayed in your place. Maya's hand shook as she scrolled through the messages. Emails, texts, even threats. Her bank sent her an alert. She clicked on it. Her account was frozen. Her last bit of money gone. Her heart pounded. This wasn't just an attack on her name. They were trying to erase her. Maya paced her apartment, rage burning in her chest. They're trying to destroy me, she whispered, voice shaking. Jonathan sat across from her, his expression unreadable. Calm, focused, calculated. They're afraid of you, he said simply. Maya laughed bitterly. That's not fear. That's a warning. They want me to disappear. Jonathan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. You had nothing, Maya. And yet, they still see you as a threat. He tilted his head. That means you're doing something right. She swallowed hard, the truth of his words settling deep in her bones. They weren't doing this because she was weak. They were doing it because she was powerful, and they were terrified of what she could build. Maya knew what she had to do. She had spent too much time in silence, too much time letting them decide the story. If they wanted a war, she was done hiding. She grabbed her phone, took a deep breath, and hit live. Her face appeared on the screen, tired, worn down, but unshaken. Thousands of people flooded in almost instantly. She looked straight into the camera. They tried to silence me. They tried to take my job, my career, my reputation, all because I refused to let a black man bleed out on the floor of a hospital. She saw the comments explode, people demanding answers, others calling her a liar. It didn't matter. She continued. They froze my bank accounts. They sent threats. They put my face on every news station, twisting my story. But I'm still here. She let those words sink in. And then, I'm building a hospital where every life matters. The screen erupted. Her voice steadied, stronger now. No red tape. No politics. No discrimination. Just medicine. Asterisk, asterisk, the support came fast. Say less. Where can I donate? We're with you, Maya. Westbridge is shaking right now. Finally, someone who cares. She felt it shift, the tide turning in her favor. This was no longer just her fight. This was a revolution. And she was ready. What do you think? Should Maya keep fighting, or is this too dangerous? Let us know. Press 2 if you support Maya's war against the system. Press 3 if you think she should walk away. The wind was crisp that morning, carrying the scent of fresh paint and the faint hum of city life. The sun peeked over the skyline, casting golden light on the gleaming glass exterior of a brand-new hospital, her hospital. Maya stood at the entrance, staring at the engraved plaque mounted beside the doors. Caldwell Memorial Hospital, where every life matters, her name was etched in steel, no longer a footnote in someone else's empire. A lump formed in her throat as her fingers traced the letters. She had fought, lost, broken, and rebuilt. And now, she was here. Months ago, she had walked out of Westbridge Memorial in the rain, discarded like she was nothing. Today, she stood before something that proved she was everything. She had built this from the ashes. And no one, no system, no corrupt hospital board, no racist executives could take it away. As Maya stepped through the entrance, a rush of pride and disbelief surged through her. The hospital was alive. Doctors and nurses moved with purpose, but not fear. Patients sat comfortably in the waiting area, not judged by their status, not turned away because of insurance complications. She walked through the hallways lined with art, warm lighting replacing the sterile coldness of corporate hospitals. A mother clutched her newborn to her chest, smiling with relief. A black teenage boy, his arm in a sling, laughed as a nurse adjusted his bandages. A Latina grandmother, speaking limited English, was met with care, not dismissal. No one was ignored. No one was treated as disposable. This was what healthcare was supposed to be. Tears burned behind her eyes. She heard the whispers before she saw him. Dr. Caldwell stood outside the hospital gates, watching her empire from a distance. Maya turned slowly, locking eyes with him through the crowd. His once arrogant smirk was gone. His expensive suit couldn't hide the weight of defeat pressing on his shoulders. Westbridge Memorial was bleeding out. Donors had pulled funding. Patients had left. Lawsuits had been filed. The same board members who had stood by his side when he threw Maya out into the rain had now turned their backs on him. And he knew why. Maya didn't move, didn't gloat, didn't speak. She just held his gaze. Silent, unapologetic, victorious. After a long moment, Calloway turned and walked away. As Maya walked past one of the recovery rooms, she paused at the doorway. A familiar young man lay in the hospital bed, his breathing steady, his eyes bright with life. Dante Hughes, the boy she had saved that night. The reason all of this had started. He looked up at her, expression filled with something she hadn't seen before. Gratitude. And something deeper. "You didn't just save my life," he said, voice hoarse. "You gave me a future." Maya swallowed the lump in her throat. His mother sat by his bedside, gripping his hand, her eyes filled with quiet tears. That night in the ER, she had thought she was losing everything. But in reality, she had saved more than one life. She had changed everything. As Maya turned a corner, a small voice stopped her. She glanced down and saw a little black girl standing there, clutching the hem of her mother's coat. The girl looked up at Maya, her brown eyes wide with wonder. "Are you the lady who made this hospital?" Maya knelt, smiling. "I am." The girl shifted, nervous but determined. "I want to be a doctor like you." Maya's heart swelled. She reached out, gently placing her hands on the girl's shoulders. "Then you will be." The little girl grinned, her whole face lighting up. Maya saw herself in her. The same hunger to fight for something bigger. The same fire that refused to die. This moment was why she had fought. Why she had bled, lost, and suffered. Why she had never backed down. Because change wasn't about one person. It was about planting seeds in the next generation. Maya stood, looking out at the hospital she had built, the lives she had saved, the future she had created. This was her legacy. Her war was won. And this was just the beginning. What do you think? Did Maya's journey inspire you? What would you have done in her place? Let us know. Press 9 if you believe in her legacy. Press 8 if you think her fight isn't over yet. Maya's journey was never just about her. It was about every person who has ever been told they don't belong, who has ever been forced to stay silent in the face of injustice, who has ever been punished for choosing what is right over what is easy. It was about fighting for something greater than yourself, even when the world pushes back with everything it has. She lost everything, her job, her reputation, her security, for saving a life. And yet, she gained more than she ever could have imagined. Because courage is not measured by what you keep, but by what you refuse to lose. Maya refused to lose her integrity, her compassion, her purpose. And now, look at what she built. A hospital where no one is turned away. A place where no child is left suffering, no mother is forced to beg for care, no human being is denied the right to life because of their race or income. She stood up to a system designed to crush her, and instead of breaking, she created something stronger. And that's the lesson here. The world will try to silence you. It will tell you that you are too small to make a difference, that your voice doesn't matter, that fighting back is pointless. But that is a lie. The greatest changes in history have come from those who refused to accept the way things were. Maybe you're facing your own battle right now. Maybe you feel stuck in a system that wasn't built for you. Maybe you've been told to stay in your place, to stop fighting, to accept things as they are. But Maya's story is proof that you do not have to accept anything less than what you deserve. So ask yourself, what would you have done in Maya's shoes? Would you have walked away, or would you have stood your ground, even when the cost was high? Because the truth is, there are people out there right now who are counting on someone like you to take a stand. And just like Maya, you are not alone. If her story inspired you, if it made you angry, hopeful, empowered, then be a part of the change. Like this video to show your support for Maya and for everyone who has ever been told they weren't enough. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of resilience, of justice, of people who refuse to back down. Because this isn't the end. Maya's story may have reached its victory, but there are countless others still fighting their battles. And together, we can make sure their voices are heard. So, will you stand with Maya? Will you fight for something bigger than yourself? Press 1 if you believe in change. Press subscribe if you want to be part of a community that fights for what's right. Because this story isn't just Maya's. It's all of ours.